Good morning, children. Today we shall learn about an interesting topic, latitudes and longitudes. Always you are interested in knowing more about the earth because it's a very fantastic place to live, and you always try to find out more and more details about the earth. So if you want to find out about the earth, you need to find a clear representation of it. Now you have already learned our earth is not neither a round in shape nor a perfect sphere. It is slightly flattened at the top and the bottom. So you call the topmost portion as the North Pole and the bottom portion as the South Pole. That means they are the North Pole, you call it as the North Pole and the South Pole respectively. This shape can be best known with the help of an representation, a true representation of the earth, which you call as a globe. I think all of you know what is a globe. Globe is a representation of the earth. This is the representation of the earth which you call as the globe, and this globe is a true model of the earth and it is drawn on small scale. And the globe is always mounted on an axis. You know here there is an axis which is tilted, and it can move around it on this axis. You can turn it round and round. It spins on its axis in the way and it is similar the way that the earth rotates on its axis. Our earth is also having an axis on which it keeps on rotating round and round. This axis of the earth, even on this globe you can see the axis here. This axis is a little bit tilted. Here on the picture drawn on the board also shows that it is a little bit tilted, and it is tilted to a degree of 66.5 degree. It is in a slanting position of 66.5 degree, and it is this tilting that result in the formation of wind, then ocean currents, seasons. All this result in the happens because of the tilting of this axis. And this axis passes through the North Pole and the South Pole of the earth. That means it passes through the center of the earth in a tilted manner. And I already told this tilting of the axis is responsible mainly for the change in season, for the occurrence of day and night, etc. Now there is an imaginary line which is drawn in the center of this earth, which you call as 0 degree equator. You call it as 0 degree equator, or even on the globe or a map you can see the 0 degree equator. It divides the earth, equator divides the earth into two equal halves. In the northern portion you call it as the northern hemisphere, and the southern portion you call as the southern hemisphere. That is the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. Now what is an equator? I already told about equator. Equator, in one single term you can call equator as a 0 degree latitude. Equator is a 0 degree latitude. And see, there are 90 degrees of similar latitude towards the North Pole, and there are 90 degrees of similar latitudes towards the South Pole. You measure all these latitudes in degrees. You always measure it in degrees. So there are 90 degrees of latitudes towards the North Pole and 90 degrees of latitude towards the South Pole. These lines are always imaginary lines. You can never see it on the earth, but they are all for the purpose of calculation. You draw it, and thereby you call these as imaginary lines. All are imaginary lines. So since all these lines are parallel to the equator, you call it as parallels of latitudes. Similarly, in the South Pole also these lines are drawn parallel to the equator, and thereby you call them also as parallels of latitude. So there are 90 parallels of latitudes towards the North Pole and 90-degree parallels of latitude towards the South Pole. And as it goes towards the North Pole or towards the South Pole, its size goes on decreasing. And any of this line never touch each other. Each of these lines never touch each other. When you look at the picture, you will understand these lines never intersect or touch each other. So if you are asked what is an equator? What is an equator? It's an imaginary line which divides the earth into two equal halves, North Pole and South Pole, or northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere. You also call it as parallels of latitudes. These lines are also called lines of latitudes also, because they are drawn in lines which are parallel to the equator. Together you call it as parallels of latitudes. There are four important parallels of latitudes. They are Tropic of Cancer, Arctic Circle, Tropic of Capricorn and Antarctic Circle. Arctic Circle is 66.5 degree which lies in the North Pole. Tropic of Cancer 23.5 degree north which lies in the northern hemisphere. Then Tropic of Capricorn 23.5 degree south, and Antarctic Circle 66.5 degree south. So these are the four important parallels of latitudes, and these parallels of latitudes have resulted in the formation of different heat zones which result in giving you different seasons. Now we will have a brief review of what you have learned about latitudes. So you had learned latitudes are imaginary circles which are drawn on a globe. I already told you they are imaginary lines that are drawn on a globe. They are also called parallels of latitudes because they lie parallel to equator. Now they never meet each other. All these lines never meet each other. They are always equidistant. That means the distance between two parallels of latitudes are always same. That is why you call it as equidistant. And the first parallel is equator. The first parallels of latitude is the equator, which is the 0 degree latitude. You call equator as 0 degree latitude. And these latitudes are always measured in degrees. Latitudes are always measured in degrees. Then it divides this equator. The longest latitude divides the earth into two equal halves. One is the northern hemisphere and the other is the southern hemisphere. Then it's an angular distance of the location of north of equator 90 degree, and in the south it is 90 degree. Okay, with this I hope you understood what is latitude. Thank you.